It seems lately that with all the craziness happening in the world, it's becoming easier and easier to forget about all the things that could be even worse going on in the world around us that we can't see. Seems like every time we turn on the television, there's just more and more destruction and chaos. And it gets me wondering, is this what they want? Is this all a very carefully carried out plan to take the focus away from the world of the unknown? To make sure we don't get too close to figuring out the truth about what really goes on behind the scenes? The things the powerful elite and possible government entities who we are indoctrinated to trust since the time we learned to talk don't want us to see? What is it they're trying to distract us from? Well, what we're going to focus on today is continuation in the bizarre disappearances in the woods. After all, the families of the missing can never be distracted or distracted into forgetting that their loved one was here one minute and poof, gone the next. In researching the FAE and the connection with those who vanish, I have a feeling inside that I came so very close to touching on something. To lifting, or at least thinning out the veil that separates the actual truth from the reality we're taught to believe. After all, if you're subscribed to this channel and interested in this title, it stands to reason that you, too, are wondering what exactly is lurking in the woods. In the deep, dark parts of the world's forests and national parks, something is snatching and stalking helpless humans, seemingly right out of existence. Come and take another walk with me, folks, as I explore the deepest depths of not only the reality we see right in front of us, but perhaps the hidden worlds of the unknown, in the deepest, darkest depths of our very minds. But be careful. Don't be the first or last in line. Don't go near the boulder fields. Don't pick berries. Don't wear red. And don't insult that which you're unfamiliar with. And please, whatever you do, don't turn a corner and separate from the group. Here's part 2 of The Missing and the FAE. Before we begin, let's all try and get the images out of our head of the fairies, fae folk, that we were taught about as small children. The tiny, sparkly, and happy, always trying to help and devastatingly beautiful creatures who flutter around us wildly, sometimes sprinkling us with sparkly fairy dust to help us to sleep. Well, maybe something like that, as far as the fairy dust is concerned. But I'm convinced that there is something much more sinister afoot, that these very small, usually ornery and not so helpful beings use to confuse and put humans to sleep so they can steal them away, take them from the here that is known to there, which is unknown, or the other. If only it were as simple and cutesy and fun as a little sprinkle of glittery dust and poof, all our troubles go away. In reality, however, it's more like sudden confusion which causes unrelenting panic as the hapless victims of these clever little tricksters, in the blink of an eye, find themselves completely lost, completely turned around, dazed and confused as to what just happened and where they are. Sometimes days are lost, sometimes more, and sometimes the victim is gone forever, lost to whatever game the fairies decided to make them a part of. Imagine, completely helpless, alone and afraid, screaming at the top of their lungs, only to find that they have no voice. Now, these little people are not always so little. While the majority of them are said to be under 4 feet tall, most even shorter, some have been said to be as tall as 7 feet. Just like humans, the way they look varies drastically from one to the other, with all having different facial features and personalities. Let's talk about some similarities between what's going on in the woods with all the clusters of missing people all over the world and what we know about the FAE. First off, boulder fields, and circles of stones in particular, should never be disturbed. This is where they live and play, and you do not want to disturb their home or resting place. They don't take kindly to anything they see disrespectful, and as seemingly very sensitive little creatures, that's most anything they don't give you permission to say or do. Do not even approach such places unless you're prepared for the fate that lay ahead of you, should you dare. After all, how could you be granted permission to do anything by entities in which you can't see with your human eyes unless they should choose to allow you to look upon them, which they most often do not give? If they ever should grant you this permission to gaze upon them, be wary, for they almost always have something up their sleeves. If you do not come prepared with gifts of sweets, alcohol, and or tobacco, do not expect a very generous welcome. In fact, if you do not bring such gifts, I suggest stay away altogether, as this will anger them. And they carry such great wrath for being so very tiny in size for the most part. There seems to also be an inordinate amount of people who go missing near berry bushes. You may be struck with an unexplained need to go and fill several baskets with juicy plump black or huckle or red or blueberries. There are too many kinds to name out there in the wild. We see all the time in movies about survival in the deep woods and forest that you should always beware of eating the berries to stay alive, for they might just be poisonous and, ironically, the very thing that kills you off. However, who do you think has poisoned the berries? Struck with a sudden and irresistible impulse to go and gather the fresh fruit, you're most likely lured by the FAE to your doom. They like to play, after all, and among the bushes and brambles of the berry patches is where they are known to do their dancing and mating. This is where they embrace the earth and sing with all their heart, sometimes fully visible, and most of the time at least audible to humans who are unfortunate enough to be in the general vicinity of them. If you should catch a glimpse of a dance or even a whisper of a tune, turn back, for they do not like to be disturbed. Again, they only like to be seen and heard if they choose it. If their choice should be taken away, then there will be consequences. Could this be the fate of so many who have disappeared among a berry patch in recent years? My advice? Go to your local grocer's produce section. They may not be as fresh as fresh picked, but hey, at least you won't be lost forever in the produce aisle. Fairies are known for more when it comes to disappearing things than taking humans and putting them somewhere else, either for a little while or for the rest of their days. If you aren't extremely careful in which paths you take and follow while out in the woods, you could just happen upon a fairy procession. They mostly take part in this activity by the light of the full moon, and should you stumble upon it, you just may be allowed to escape back to your home and your family and all that is loved by you, only to lose your mind within days, as the FAE have powerful magic. Just a look into their eyes, and your senses could be lost forever, with your physical body being wherever you are, while your mind is viewing their lives through their eyes, only you cannot decipher the difference. Should a fairy dressed in red approach and slap you about the body, surely you will die. Woe be unto anyone who tries to remove you from their grasp, even after death. Once a fairy claims you, you are rightfully theirs, at least as far as they're concerned. A person looking to investigate the effect the FAE have on or what part they play in the world of the missing has a lot to do with which cultures, legends, and lore you're looking into. In order to understand the way these little people work, you must know how things are done where they are from, and I don't just mean learning to avoid offending them or which treats to leave in case you should find yourself in their bad graces. Let's explore the world a little bit and see where these legends may have come from and what connection they could possibly have to all these cases of the missing popping up more and more frequently in today's news. In Ireland, there are many theories of origin for these devilish creatures. We spoke in part 1 about the belief that they are fallen angels or demons or even the deceased that were unfortunately not good enough for heaven or bad enough for hell. There's another legend, however, one seemingly as old as time, which states that the FAE are certain children of Eve. According to this Celtic myth, when Eve was in the garden, after having tasted the forbidden fruit and learning she was naked, she hastily decided she must wash her children so they will be presentable in the sight of the Lord when he returned. Well, before she could wash them all, as there were many, she heard him fast approaching. She took all the children that were left that had not been bathed and hid them underground. Because she and Adam, and presumably in this tale all of their children as well, were then thrown out of and banned forever from the Garden of Eden because of the disobedience involving the fruit due to the trickery of the evil serpent, the unwashed children ended up being left behind, left underground to find and make their own way. Obviously, leaving children to live in their own underground world with no adult supervision ever could never lead to anything good, hence how the civilization was built. This fable differs a bit from time to time, with one of the ways it's told being God was simply angry in general for Eve not being able to keep all of her children constantly clean, and he took it as a sign of disrespect, as the children were constantly in his sight and presence very dirty. Therefore, during one of these times when he had come upon the children and most of them were unwashed, he was so angry that he took all who weren't clean and banished them to live underground, never being able to come up for 1,000 years. This punishment would ensure that Eve would never see them again and therefore be more diligent in making her children presentable in the sight of the Lord. Either way, it seems, the children were then left underground to their own devices and to fend for themselves, eventually cultivating and growing this community of little people who are seemingly childlike, but who keep ancient and dark magic within them. They hold the secrets to this magic very tightly and use it only when there's no other choice. Like, for example, if someone should disrespect them or their territory, as previously mentioned. Another theory of the Emerald Isle is that the Fae are an ancient race that preceded even the Celts in inhabiting the land we now know as Ireland, and England as well. The Celts then came in and drove the little creatures out of the land by destroying their civilizations and viciously slaughtering these little people, forcing those that survived to go underground and take part in a one-sided revenge war for the rest of time. This is why sometimes it's said that the Fae have a deep-rooted hatred for human beings, even though most modern-day legends and lore leave that part out, claiming simply that they are mischievous and mostly harmless. Either way, and no matter what you believe or which country's legends and lore you choose to set store by, they possess this ancient magic which no other human or creature possesses, and also which no one and nothing else can replicate. The last Irish legend we're going to discuss today is one that is most widely accepted as being the possible reason for the connection between the Fae and the missing 411 phenomenon, though we will only touch on the surface of it here. This legend says that the Fae are actually some form of interdimensional beings whose universe has somehow bumped up against or intertwined with ours. This makes sense for why sometimes we can see them and then in the blink of an eye they're gone. It could also explain why, once you've been selected and taken by them, you are never seen again. What is underground to us may be, for them, their very universe, their world. In fact, they may not even really be going underground at all, only seeming to, as this is the way they return to their own place and time. Modern-day scientists are constantly exploring theories as to whether or not these types of things, such as other dimensions and the ability to travel to and from them, are possible, and the general belief is that in fact they do exist, and while we may not have the knowledge of how to travel back and forth, either within dimensions or through time, that doesn't mean that nobody or no thing in all the universe doesn't. In fact, from what these scientists believe they know now, in the present moment, is that we as a species are very far behind most other dimensions and species out there, of which there are an almost infinite number when it comes to themes such as these, and also understanding quantum law and all that other scientific stuff, which, if maybe we could collectively understand and break it down, who knows? Maybe we can recover a lot of our people who have seemingly vanished without a trace. After all, if all this really turns out to be true, then it means they have just vanished from our sight, from our plane of existence, and not necessarily that they've vanished forever without a trace anywhere. Now, let's get back to our world travels and see what some other countries have to say about where the Fae and the seemingly endless amounts of legends regarding them could have come from. In ancient times, it was well known that fairies actually cared more about humanity and what happened to human beings than most humans themselves did. This is especially true for human peasants. They are known throughout the world to have cultivated a wonderful relationship with the Fae and even worked to serve the Fairy Queen, as she and her minions cared more about and certainly helped them more than any nobility which was in power. In fact, fairies back in those days, before being driven underground, were just as likely to live in the house in the villages right along with the humans, sometimes without the humans' knowledge, but most times with not only their knowledge but also their blessing. They were known far and wide among the poorer classes and peasants as an ally, and as helpful little people who could use enchantment to keep certain towns villages, or even individual houses where they were welcome and accepted, safe from the ravages of the many wars back then and also from so many other deadly things someone from those times would have come across on a daily basis. The fairies helped make medicines with their magic to keep the villagers from becoming sick with one pandemic or another, and sometimes they would even return a child from death, if, of course, the price was right. Although there was always too large a consequence for both the humans and the fairies involved, so this was not often done. They were even known to make entire villages invisible to keep them safe from an approaching torch mob or an angry army. Remember how long ago this all was, though, and please don't give it much thought should you ever encounter a fairy or one of their many dwelling places. Though we are not entirely sure why this relationship has changed so drastically throughout the ages, we can be quite sure that it has, and that's really all we need to know. It's said that humans have simply moved on and forgot how we were helped by the Fae, forgot how essential they once were to the survival of our very species, and because of this, some of the Fae now seek revenge. Unwilling to be used and then tossed aside when no longer needed like some kind of old rag, the disrespect they feel for and the disdain they have towards the human race, at least in some fairy cultures, and yes, they have different cultures which hold different beliefs and act in different ways as well. Some choose to exist on the edges of our vision, wanting nothing but peace and to just keep out of the way of humans altogether. Then there are the other kinds, the kind which we will discuss right now. Keep in mind always that regardless of how their feelings toward humanity have either evolved or devolved throughout the centuries, all the Fae folk are known to be either a bit or almost completely devilish in nature. It's something they can't help, even if they should want to. They can be extremely benign or extremely dangerous, with the latter being akin to vampires, literally sucking the life force out of any human it should encounter and using the ancient magic in its being to disappear any of the evidence, perhaps back to its own dimension. Let's move on to discussing the many different types of encounters one could possibly have with the Fae. The first type would be the testing of morality encounters. If there's one thing almost all the legends about them have in common, is that they are enforcers of morality, which is why they live so much by the code of mutual respect. They will often appear to test a person's generosity and kindness. And when I think about missing 411, I think of the young children who go missing without a trace and wonder, after exploring this type of encounter deeper, if the Fae know the difference between the mind of an adult and the mind of a human child. Keep this question in mind as we move forward. Keep the encounters that are known to be had and the types of people who go missing in mind, and see if you can't figure out, possibly, which encounter each group of missing may have had to experience in order to fail the test and end up missing in this world, or this plane of existence, forever. If we assume the missing haven't come across the type of enchanting fairy who will use their powers and magic of enchantment to seduce you simply to drain your life force, your blood, to gain their strength, you may encounter the type mentioned above. During such encounters, the fairy will often disguise itself as a beggar or some other person who is in desperate need of something you possess. Those who help out and are kind and generous will receive blessings, for example, being led out of the woods if one should be lost. But if you are unkind and not helpful at all, and perhaps even show some disdain toward the pathetic fellow whose form it has chosen, then woe be unto you. You will face dire consequences, sometimes even the loss of your very life. Perhaps even worse, you might be led to be invisible to the human eye and left to wander about circling the same part of the forest again and again in some kind of enchantment where there is never a way out. Perhaps there you'll be for all eternity, with your loved ones or even the authorities right within your reach, only you will forever be unable to grasp them. The Fae were known to bury entire villages in avalanches or drown them in floods because of just one bad encounter with just one unsympathetic human who very well could have just been having a bad day. The second type of encounter one might have is when a fairy chooses you to help them carry out some kind of work they need to do. Should you accept and help the Fae again, you will receive some form of blessing, although you quite possibly won't have any memory of the encounter or the work in which you helped them carry out. However, if you should refuse, you could very well be driven into madness. A madness so deep you will never come out of it. a madness that some might say is worse than even death itself. Keep in mind always, despite the intention of the little person you encounter, they have a spitefulness and mean streak deeply ingrained into them, especially when it comes to the human race, who so callously abandoned them once they were released from the throes of poverty and destitution of ancient times. In this modern world, to most, they are nothing more than fairy tale creatures, and obviously this offends them greatly. Some cultures, even to this day, believe that this is where mental illness comes in. Remember how we established the FAE used to live side by side in the same home as humans, and some of them still choose to visit a home from time to time? In fact, some hauntings can even be possibly attributed simply to an offended little person. The FAE will sit invisible on the shoulder of the person deemed mad and torment them day and night without rest or sleep, essentially driving them to their early graves. Always make sure to return a favor given to you by a fairy. They will sometimes show up to offer help when it's most needed at some point in a human's life. Perhaps while grieving the loss of a loved one or while in some kind of health crisis. The little person will use the ancient magic in them to heal the person or provide a deep sense of peace and comfort. They do these things, for the most part, without asking for permission, so technically you accept without knowing it. Then you are forever indebted to the FAE, and all the bad luck and misfortune will find you should you not repay these favors immediately when called upon to do so. As we already discussed, there are many different types of FAE folk, just as human beings. Some are inherently helpful and kind, while some are infinitely evil and downright deadly. The latter type are known to target specific humans, usually for the smell of their blood is appealing to the devilish fiend, or for some other type of reason we have neither way of knowing nor controlling. This type will seek a person out simply to drink its blood, torment it, or, and here's where the mind might wander to the missing, take the human as an eternal slave. After all, just because they are much more diminutive in size than us humans, remember how strong their magic is. We as a species seem to have lost most, if not all, of our ancient magic, and therefore the FAE are much more powerful in every single conceivable way than we are. They may not be able to overtake us with strength alone, but make no mistake, they are much stronger mentally and magically, and are a most formidable opponent. My mind can't help here but to wonder to all of the intellectuals who are known to go missing on a random hunting or hiking trip. Could it be these FAE creatures have happened upon randomly or specifically hunted down these extremely intelligent beings, or they have grown bored of playing with intellectually inferior humans they normally encounter? Perhaps they enjoy the mental sparring so much, they choose to keep this human with them forever, using it as some sort of sick plaything to see how long it takes to mentally break down such a smart person to their most basic form of caveman mentality, thus draining the human slave/toy of all its intelligence right down to its most basic human knowledge of the world and itself over a period of possibly centuries, all the while keeping it hidden from other humans and feeding off its life force. Until, inevitably, the human dies and the fairy must then move on to what it sees as a bigger and better challenge in the form of another human, who may be even smarter and more intellectually advanced than its last pet. Keeping in mind all the time while exploring this theory that time passes differently for the FAE. With what seems centuries to us as mere minutes or even seconds to them. My advice? Keep some kind of iron on you at all times and make sure it's clearly visible when traveling about, especially in the deep woods. This is one of the only things known throughout all cultures to even be remotely successful at keeping the fairies at bay. One of the many deeply ingrained powers of humanity is our ability to use symbols and objects to break other species, beings, and magical powers, especially when those powers are dark and turned toward us. Perhaps it's magic, or maybe it's just an uncanny knack for getting rid of curses and hexes. The same is true when it comes to warding off the FAE. Despite the many missing, who most are sure fell victim to a rambling and dangerous FAE, we, as a species, have been most successful. Let's talk now about symbols and objects known to break magical power, including the magic of the FAE. Historically, these include but aren't limited to rabbit's feet, inside-out clothing, crosses, and believe it or not, even pictures of a Japanese emperor have all been known to successfully prevent further or initial attacks on humans. Some of you may be familiar with these things, and some may not. Either way, it's definitely something we should all know, especially those of us who spend any time at all in the woods or forests. Okay, let's be honest, even if we spend time in our own backyard. First, Those of us who know how to use the evil eye are in luck, as this is said to be the most effective way to injure a fairy and defend ourselves during an attack, either on the mind or body. The evil eye is second in winning its victory in this way, only to non-galvanized iron. It is said that some races can't even be looked upon by humans without being injured. Others can't use their magic against us when presented with the evil eye. So, if you aren't aware of what this is or how to effectively use it, maybe you should learn. Unless a fairy has attached itself to you as a familiar, and trust me, you will know if this has happened, never accept its hospitality. It's completely impossible to tell the difference between a well-meaning and helpful fae who cares deeply about humanity and an evil one who is pretending so it can lure you into its web for either the reason of making you a slave or a snack. Trust me when I say you won't know until it's far too late. You don't have to verbally accept anything or even acknowledge these small, seemingly benign and insignificant gestures of so-called hospitality either. All you have to do is anything other than clearly stating no. Remember, though, not to be offensive or insulting in any way unless you're prepared to fight. Once you have danced with, accepted food from, or even allowed a fairy to brush your hair, you're in their complete and total debt. So be sure and keep your wits about you, and don't be fooled. The nice and friendly kind are far harder to come by, as humanity and its wars and destruction of the very forest they make their homes in is definitely on almost all species of fairies' naughty list. And many are just aching for revenge. Keep in mind here too, even if the fairy wishes no ill intent towards you and has no plans to kill or enslave you for accepting these gestures of goodwill from them, even if the gestures are genuine, once you accept, you are automatically in the fairy realm and no longer in our world. In that case, even if the fairy you're canoodling with means you no harm, once in their realm, it will be all the more harder for you to protect yourself against any attacks from the more vengeful and bloodthirsty type among them. See, unless the fairy is a familiar of yours, and this doesn't simply mean you know it well or its friend, I'm talking more like a witch's familiar, like they have sometimes in black cats or other animals. It will be unable and more than likely unwilling to protect you while in the realm of the other fae. They will face dire consequences and repercussions simply for befriending a human and offering this hospitality to you, and can face certain death from fairies higher up in the realm than they are, and will never be willing to risk or sacrifice themselves to protect you. They could even be compelled to join in your torture. Make no mistake that they will, too, if it means saving themselves. It's basically impossible to return to our own world or realm once we have entered that of the fae. We will be forever lost, possibly a story in someone's missing person in the woods video here on YouTube. There's always the chance you'll just waste away, whether or not you could get back had you eaten or danced with these little beings. Many a human has been known to wander between realms, never again experiencing happiness or pleasure, not even on the smallest scale, after having dined, danced, or spent time with the fae. Many who are of the opinion fairies are directly responsible for many, if not most, of the missing 411 in the woods and forest encounters will tell you that sometimes it's just a twist of fate or bad luck to have stumbled upon a fairy or its colony. It can happen, and more often than not does, that without the human or the fairy planning it at all, the human will stumble upon it or their paths will somehow cross. In this case, it's best not to try and reason with them or explain yourself, as this is when, throughout history, humans have been most well known to try and steal their treasures. Best to just apologize and move along as quickly as possible, provided that is that they allow you to. Perhaps when in the forest, keep a bit of alcohol, tobacco, or sweets with you in case something like this should happen. You're more likely to be allowed to leave in one piece if you can give them a gift, a peace offering, if you will. There are certain times, though, very, very limited in nature, that a fae folk may truly be in need of human assistance and will therefore honestly try and hire you to do some work for them. Examples may include when their colony comes under attack, say by a deity or a ghost or spirit who wishes to overtake their colony, cause general mischief, or even kill and overthrow the fairy queen. The fairies will then seek to employ a human being to draw a cross on the trees where they've made their home. This somehow allows the fae to hide safely within the tree without being seen by the evil entities. Keep in mind that this can be a very dangerous job for the human, as these beings can also, as most of us know, either possess, cause harm to, stalk, or even kill us or our loved ones. The Fae are all but defenseless against them, which is why they need us in the first place. However, if you should succeed in helping the fairies to hide from these mortal enemies and help to save and preserve their colony and queen, you will be rewarded just as you would be by a Germanic woodwife, which is with a full bag of lovely scented wood chips. Be sure to thank and graciously accept this payment, as it's said that as soon as you leave the forest with this treasure, that is indeed what it becomes as the chips turn to pure gold. There are stories of mean-spirited, ungrateful humans who have gone out of their way to do this work for the Fae people and refused to accept their most fantastic gift, feeling as though the saving of their kind should have earned more than a mere bag of wood chips. This did not work out well for that person, as they are said to now roam the forest where they committed this slight against the Fae, and they're left as mere phantoms, knowing not whether they're coming or going, never knowing themselves or anything out of space and time again. A perpetual circle in the forest, left like prey to any and all other creatures and entities that roam those same forests, a sheep perpetually being led to some horrible fate and definite slaughter. Oh, and if you should be so unlucky as to stumble across a fairy child, just do your best to help it find its way, regardless of how mischievous and ungrateful it may be towards you. For these small beings are taught that humans are basically the boogeyman. You may or may not get anything for your trouble, though. It depends on the relationship its parents have with the human race, whatever their experiences may have been, good or bad. However, if you refuse to help or insult the child in some way, woe be unto you, as you'll end up in the aforementioned perpetual phantom state. Finally, the Fae folk most often will seek the help of certain humans, depending on your aura field, which they can very easily read, to clean their fields, birth their children, guard their queen, and watch their cattle. Should you do a good job, you will earn the wage of gold or the relief from something that is ailing you. The fairies are known to not only be able to cause, but to cure most human aches and pains, but also some diseases as well. Regardless of what the payment is, you are encouraged to just accept the task asked of you by the Fae. Do not try and find out what the pay or reward will be in advance, as this is considered to be very rude. As a rule, fairies themselves are generally hardworking and consider it abhorrent behavior for anyone to refuse a hard day's work, regardless of what the pay might be. Remembering we are also speaking of the mysterious missing here, I'd be remiss not to remind you that if you do not know by sight or sound which Fae you are dealing with, it's best to be extremely careful not to stumble upon them in general. There are some races of the Fae, the Baba Yaga for one, who will hire a human with promise of great reward, only to give them impossible tasks to complete, so the end of the day sees much punishment, possibly enslavement, going missing in the human realm, for as long as the Fae see fit. Is this what has happened to the very few who have gone missing in the forest for long stretches of time, only to return, either not remembering or refusing to speak of where they'd been the whole time? Perhaps we'll never know. After all, the Fae are known to be quite tight-lipped, and regardless of how friendly one species may be toward the humans, as we say, blood is thicker than water, and at the end of the day, most of the Fae will stick with their own kind. I want to reiterate some of what we should have taken from this story today, as my concern for the missing is ever growing the more I myself learn about these little creatures of lore known as the Fae. Keep in mind that generally they are not the wish-granting, super cute and sparkly little lovers portrayed in fairy tales and children's bedtime stories. They are nasty and ill-tempered with a great love of abducting people, humans to be exact. It's one of their favorite pastimes actually, and the stalking of the prey is what they enjoy most, almost more than the actual abduction and enslavement itself. Pointing back to the missing 411 phenomena and all the unfortunate disappearances there, let's take a look now at some of the correlation between the parameters that are set up and how almost all of them can somehow be traced back to the Fae and their fiendish pastimes. Storms and weather events. Fairies are nature spirits and can control the elements, mainly water and storms. In the case of the missing, search and rescue are often stopped and put on indefinite hold because of some inclement weather event that seems to come up out of nowhere. If you were a fairy and had abducted some poor unsuspecting human, would you not use all of your power over the elements to stop the human from being found? Keeping in line with the elemental facts of possible fairy involvement in these missing cases, I point you now towards the boulder fields and bodies of water found in the area where a lot of these people went missing from. In folklore, bodies of water, particularly streams and brooks found in most forests and national parks, are known to belong to elemental beings, which the Fae definitely are, and the element they manipulate the most is thought by some to be water. Boulder fields, on the other hand, are known all over the world as the domains of the Fae. You'd be hard-pressed to find a fairy legend where they did not have dominion over all the boulder fields and small bodies of water in the forest. Not only in the missing 411 phenomena cases, but also in UFO, Sasquatch, and cryptid literature, you will find a general refusal from most animals, search dogs in particular, refusing to venture into woods that once they would have explored without hesitation. These dogs are usually trained to search and rescue and hunt. However, in so many cases of the missing, we find that the canines just absolutely refuse to do the job they were born and trained to do. A job which any other time they love to do. The dogs are scared. Plain and simple, and looking into much of fairy folklore, you will see precisely why this happens. This behavior is not only rife in fairy lore, but also becoming more and more common in each missing person case we've come across where a search and rescue canine was employed. They simply refuse to pick up the scent. The same is true for the missing's pets, who unfortunately accompanied them out into the wilderness and most likely witnessed the fairy abduction. The dogs are afraid of the fray, as I reiterate. They are nasty and mean little creatures and sometimes put a hex of confusion on the poor mutts, making it chase and bite its own tail, sometimes going so far as to invisibly injure the animal. That's right, they use fairy magic and play a game with their children, sort of like the human version of piñata, only with magical needles that make the animal bleed but leave no mark. I won't explain further, just use your imagination. The next connection I want to help you understand is one many find the most creepy of all, the disembodied sounds heard by search and rescue people and volunteers. They will hear disembodied screams for help or moaning sounds of pain coming from somewhere deep in the wilderness, yet nowhere. The issue? The sounds are the voices of the missing individual they are currently out searching for. The person is already enslaved by the time the searchers come to the rescue, remembering the inclement weather and refusal of animals to hunt, which buys the fairy more time to capture its victim, and perhaps to hunt them and have their fun for a little while longer. By the time the Fae lifts all these magic, it's too late. Though the victim hasn't figured that out yet and still clings to the hope he or she will be heard, not knowing they are already lost, forever. Doomed to a life of slavery worse than anything imaginable, worse even than death. Ever wonder why some people turn up dead and some are just lost forever, never to be found, not hide nor hair of them? Well, the explanation for this is actually quite simple for anyone familiar with the Fae and their ways. You see, it's all about usefulness. Who of the humans will pose the biggest challenge to them? They don't, for example, want to hunt someone who isn't going to give them a run for their money. This is also why people who are extremely smart and very athletic, even avid hunters, are never found and seemingly lost in the very blink of an eye. The Fae want a challenge. After they've played enough, it's time to test the human's intellectual strength and or physical prowess, depending upon their particular need for that particular slave for that day. If the person proves to be useful, either physically, intellectually, or both, the Fae will keep them. If not, they will be killed and returned to our dimension, our realm, if you will. The reason places are searched dozens of times just for the person to turn up days later in the exact same spot is because the Fae was kind of interviewing them, if you will, only not for a job. Oh no, they were being interviewed for what kind of slave they'd make best. After it's decided that they are indeed useful, they will be magically transported into the Fae realm, never to be seen or heard from again, leaving absolutely no trace. How familiar does this sound to some missing person cases? Every once in a while, a mischievous and especially cruel Fae, usually a child or young adult, will place articles of clothing here or there simply to watch the searchers find it and get a renewed sense of hope. Then they stand by for days, watching and waiting until they see the hopes suddenly dashed upon the realization that they would find nothing more. In the case of the shoes, it's simple. The Fae are extremely clean folk, and shoes are very, very dirty, especially after someone has been chased through the forest, which is why the shoes are left behind. The final focus point in some of these missing persons cases I want to discuss is the berry picking. This is the simplest of all explanations, which is why I chose to do it last. Berries that grow in the forest are considered by the Fae to be their own food. They love the delicious and plump seasonal fare that grows all over some bushes near water. After all, they collect and store them in case of a shortage of maybe human blood that year, and therefore to simply pick a single berry, let alone dare to taste or eat a bunch of them, is considered thievery to the Fae and will be punishable by eternal enslavement and possibly death. In closing, is there really any truth to these legends and lore? If not, then why do they exist, and why were they told in the first place? Is there some nugget of truth in these? While it's easy to connect the dots in reverse, are we really just embracing some of these old stories to put our minds at ease because there is no real scientific or rational explanation for these cases where people have gone missing without leaving a single trace of anything behind? As Charles Fort once wrote, one measures a circle beginning anywhere. If nothing else, these stories and legends of the Fae give our minds something to focus on besides the truly unthinkable, that people can and do disappear, and we have no idea why or where they have gone. As we delve into some of these stories for future additions to this series, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments section. Meanwhile, stay safe out there in the woods. I'm Steve Stockton, and I'll talk to you next time.